Hello and welcome to Dressmaking Amore. I'm so excited to show you today how to sew this charming version of a woman's vest in an easy and non-time consuming way. With the perfect semi-fit silhouette, the Sabine vest has a modest V neckline, princess seams at the front that lead the eye down to this lovely shaped hemline that sits a tiny bit higher than a regular vest for an enhancing and comfortable look and feel. We'll be using my Sabine vest PDF sewing pattern, so to follow along, get yours at the link below in the description. Here are the materials you'll need. And please refer to your instructional booklet that comes with your pattern to choose your right size and print and assemble the pattern perfectly. And of course, all of the steps for the whole sewing process of this vest are in there. I'm using a very soft, lightweight denim, and here are our cut pattern pieces: the center front, side front, back, yoke, front facing and back facing, and the armhole binding or some ready-made bias tape for the armholes. Okay, let's get to sewing. Now before we start, let's interface our pattern pieces for stabilization. Interface the front and back facing details fully. And then take a 3 cm wide strip of interfacing to the wrong side of the hem at the front, side front, and back. Matching up the marks at the waist, pin the princess seams of the front or right sides together. Sew them with seam allowances being 1.2 centimeters, and sew them slow and carefully, making sure it's all smooth and that there are no pleats forming. Then mark the center of the yoke and the center of the back pattern pieces, and pin the yoke to the back right sides together, matching up the center marks, sewing them together with the same seam allowances of 1.2 centimeters. Then serge the princess seams and the yoke seam. Now press the princess seams towards the center front, and then the back seam up towards the yoke. Then top stitch the princess seams and the yoke seam by making 1 or 2 rows of stitching, depending on your preference. Ultimately, I went with 2 rows, the first one being 1 mm from the edge, and the second one 6 mm from the edge. Then press the seams at the front and back, and serge the shoulder edges of the front and back details, pressing them to embed the threads into the fabric. After pinning the shoulder seams of the front and back right sides together, sew with 1.2 centimeters seam allowances, and press the shoulder seams open. Now sew the shoulder seams of the neckline facing, and after pressing the seams open, clip the corners of the seam allowances like this. Serge the outer edge of the facing, and press that edge. Then pin the facing to the neckline edge, right sides together. And mark the seam allowance at the bottom edge of the vest to help you sew perfect corners. Sew from the facing side, seam allowances being 1.2 centimeters. Then trim the seam allowances in half like this, and clip at the curves of the back neckline. Now turn the seam allowances to the facing side and understitch them from the right side of the facing. Stop 2 centimeters before the corners and then continue to understitch that same distance after the corners. Flip the vest to the right side and check all the corners, making sure they're symmetrical and even. And press. Sew the side seams and serge the edges, and then press the seam allowances towards the back. With the side seam towards the back, top stitch with contrasting thread, if you like. Pin the binding edge to the armhole edge so the outer edge of the binding lays flat, leaving 1 inch at the start. Pin and sew the ends of the binding together here. Trim the excess, cutting the corners off at an angle, then sew the binding to the armhole. The seam allowances here are 6 millimeters. Fold the seam allowances towards the binding, and from the right side, understitch the binding about 1 to 2 millimeters from the edge. After that, trim the seam allowances if needed, and clip the seam allowances at the curve of the armhole. Fold the bias over the seam allowances towards the seam and base stitch it by hand, covering the seam allowances. Baste all around the armhole just like this and press. Then fold the binding to the wrong side and pin around the armhole edge and press again. From the right side, top stitch the armhole 6 millimeters from the edge. I'm using a contrasting thread here. Take out the basting thread and press. All the pressing done throughout is an important part of the process for a flawless and professional look. Now serge the bottom edge of the vest and fold the hem up to the wrong side and pin. Hem the vest by hand and press. Now we want to secure the neckline facing at the shoulder seams with a few stitches back and forth, sewing into the ditch from the right side of the fabric, just like this. Now to finish off our vest, mark the placement for the buttonholes, deciding this based on the size and amount of your buttons. For this vest, I went with 4. So on a scrap piece of fabric, sew a few samples of buttonholes, adjusting the settings of your machine and using the one that you like the look of best. Then make the holes with a seam ripper or small scissors, and you can use a pin here at each end to prevent ripping the fabric. And then place the front edges together, and at the center of your buttonhole, place a pin. Then open up that one side, and now we have the pins on the other side of the front that mark where we need to sew our buttons. Sew your buttons on at the marked points. And giving your garment a finishing press like always, we are done with our cutest Sabine vest. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this inspires you to sew this beautiful piece yourself. I know you'll love it. You can get the PDF downloadable sewing pattern that I used below at the link in the description in this video, and happy sewing!